The rain hammered against the glass windows of Sterling Tech's downtown Denver headquarters, as Rebecca Mitchell clutched her empty stomach and tried to steady herself against the cold brick wall. 3 days without a proper meal had left her weak and dizzy. The security guard uniform she wore hung loose on her thin frame, a reminder of the job she had lost 2 weeks ago when the company downsized. She pressed her back against the building and slowly slid down until she was sitting on the wet pavement. The world spun around her as she watched expensive cars pull up to the valet stand across the street. Business people in sharp suits hurried past, their umbrellas protecting them from the storm that seemed to mirror the chaos in her life. Rebecca closed her eyes and tried to remember when everything had gone wrong. 6 months ago, she had been a cybersecurity specialist at a thriving tech firm in Austin. She had a nice apartment, a reliable car, and enough money in savings to feel secure. Then the company was bought out, her department was eliminated, and her savings quickly disappeared as she struggled to find new work. The move to Denver was supposed to be a fresh start. A friend had promised her a place to stay and help finding work. But when Rebecca arrived, she discovered her friend had moved away without leaving a forwarding address. With no money for a hotel and no family to call, Rebecca had been sleeping in her car and taking odd jobs when she could find them. The security guard position had been a lifeline, even though it barely paid enough to cover gas and basic food. When that job ended, Rebecca found herself truly desperate for the first time in her life. She had always been independent, always found a way to solve her problems. But now, sitting in the rain outside one of Denver's most successful companies, she felt completely lost. Thunder rumbled overhead as Rebecca watched the last few employees leave the Sterling Tech building. Through the large windows, she could see janitors working their way through the floors, turning off lights as they finished each section. Soon the building would be empty except for the overnight security team. A sharp pain in her stomach reminded Rebecca that she had not eaten since yesterday morning when a kind woman at a coffee shop had given her a day-old pastry. She had been walking around the business district all day, hoping to find someone hiring for temporary work, but every door she tried led to the same response: they would keep her resume on file. Rebecca knew she needed to find shelter soon. The temperature was dropping, and her thin jacket was already soaked through. She had maybe enough gas in her car to run the heater for an hour, but after that she would be cold and still hungry. The local shelter had a waiting list, and the churches she had tried were already full. As she struggled to stand up, Rebecca's vision blurred and her knees buckled. She reached out for the wall, but her hand slipped on the wet brick. The sidewalk rushed up to meet her as she collapsed, her body finally giving in to days of stress and hunger. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was a pair of expensive leather shoes stopping next to her head. A man's voice called out through the rain, sounding concerned and urgent. She tried to respond but could not find the strength to speak before unconsciousness took over. Jonathan Sterling had been working late again, reviewing quarterly reports in his corner office on the 15th floor. At 35, he had built Sterling Tech from a small startup into one of Denver's most successful cybersecurity firms. The company employed over 200 people and had contracts with major corporations across the western United States. But success had come at a cost. Jonathan's marriage had ended 2 years ago when his wife grew tired of competing with his work for attention. He had few close friends and spent most of his time either at the office or in his empty penthouse apartment. His parents had passed away when he was in college, and he had no siblings to provide the family connection he sometimes craved. Tonight had been particularly long, as Jonathan dealt with some concerning security reports from their biggest client. A series of small breaches had occurred over the past month, and while they had contained each incident, Jonathan was worried about a pattern that might indicate a larger threat. He was gathering his things to leave when he heard shouting from the street below. Looking out his window, Jonathan saw a woman collapse on the sidewalk in front of his building. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. The rain soaked through his expensive suit as Jonathan knelt beside the unconscious woman. She looked young, maybe late 20s, with blonde hair plastered to her face by the rain. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she seemed dangerously thin. Jonathan checked for a pulse and was relieved to find it steady but weak. He pulled out his phone to call for an ambulance, but the woman stirred and opened her eyes before he could dial. "Please," she whispered, trying to sit up. "I'm okay. Don't call anyone." "You just collapsed," Jonathan said gently. You need medical attention. I can't afford a hospital, Rebecca replied, her voice barely audible over the rain. I just need to rest for a minute. Jonathan looked at this stranger who was clearly in distress and made a decision that would change both of their lives. He could not leave her here in the rain, but he also understood her fear about medical bills. There had to be another way to help. What's your name? He asked, helping her sit up against the building. Rebecca, she said, still fighting dizziness. I'm Jonathan. When did you last eat, Rebecca? The question brought tears to her eyes, though they were quickly washed away by the rain. Yesterday morning, she admitted. Jonathan felt something shift inside his chest. Here was someone who needed help, real help, and he was in a position to provide it. For the first time in months, he had a purpose beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. Come with me, he said, standing and offering his hand. Let's get you out of this rain. Rebecca hesitated before taking Jonathan's hand. Every instinct told her to be cautious of strangers, especially wealthy strangers who might expect something in return for their help. But the rain was getting heavier, and she could barely stand on her own. Jonathan helped her to her feet and guided her toward the entrance of Sterling Tech. The security guard at the front desk looked surprised to see the CEO returning with a soaked stranger, but Jonathan simply nodded and led Rebecca to the elevator. Where are we going? Rebecca asked, her voice still weak. My office, Jonathan replied. It's warm and dry, and I keep some food up there for late nights. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave Rebecca a chance to really look at the man who was helping her. Jonathan was tall with dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit probably cost more than she used to make in a month, but there was nothing arrogant about his manner. Jonathan's office was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of downtown Denver. But Rebecca barely noticed the decor as he led her to a comfortable chair and handed her a soft blanket from a closet. I'll be right back, Jonathan said, disappearing into a small kitchen area adjacent to his office. Rebecca wrapped the blanket around herself and tried to process what was happening. She had expected to spend the night cold and hungry in her car. Instead, she was sitting in a warm office while a stranger prepared food for her. It felt too good to be true. Jonathan returned with a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich cut into triangles. The smell made Rebecca's stomach clench with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly to avoid getting sick. This is really good, she said after a few bites. Thank you. It's just canned soup, Jonathan replied, sitting across from her. Nothing fancy. It's the best thing I've tasted in days, Rebecca said honestly. As she ate, Jonathan studied her face. There was intelligence in her eyes, and despite her current situation, she carried herself with dignity. He found himself curious about her story. Are you from Denver? He asked. Rebecca shook her head. Austin originally. I moved here a few weeks ago looking for work. What kind of work? I'm a cybersecurity specialist, Rebecca said, then laughed bitterly. At least I was. The company I worked for got bought out, and my whole department was eliminated. Jonathan leaned forward with interest. Cybersecurity? What was your focus? Threat analysis and penetration testing, Rebecca replied. I specialized in identifying vulnerabilities before the bad guys could exploit them. That's fascinating, Jonathan said. How long were you in the field? 8 years, Rebecca said, finishing the last of her soup. I started right out of college and worked my way up. I was actually pretty good at it. Jonathan could hear the pride in her voice, even tempered by her current circumstances. He was beginning to see that Rebecca's homelessness was not the result of poor choices or lack of skills, but simply bad luck and timing. Where are you staying now? He asked gently. Rebecca's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. In my car, mostly. Sometimes I can find a 24-hour laundromat or diner that will let me sit for a while. That's not safe, Jonathan said, concern evident in his voice. I know, Rebecca replied. But I don't have many options. The shelters are full, and I'm trying to save what little money I have for gas and food. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering his next words carefully. He was not normally impulsive, but something about Rebecca's situation called to him. Perhaps it was a quiet dignity in the face of hardship, or maybe it was a loneliness he recognized in her eyes that matched his own. I have a proposition, he said finally. My company has a small apartment we keep for visiting clients. It's empty right now, and you could stay there while you look for work. Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. I couldn't possibly accept that. You don't even know me. You're right, I don't know you well, Jonathan admitted. But I know you're in trouble through no fault of your own, and I'm in a position to help. Sometimes that's enough. What would you expect in return? Rebecca asked cautiously. Nothing, Jonathan said simply. Just that you use the time to get back on your feet. Rebecca felt tears welling up in her eyes. After weeks of rejection and closed doors, this unexpected kindness felt overwhelming. She had been raised to be independent, to solve her own problems, but she was out of options. Why would you do this for a stranger? She asked. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, looking out the rain-streaked windows at the city below. I've been very fortunate in my life, he said. Maybe it's time I shared some of that fortune with someone who needs it. I don't know what to say, Rebecca whispered. Say yes, Jonathan replied with a gentle smile. Let someone help you for once. Rebecca looked at this man who had found her collapsed on his doorstep and was now offering her shelter without asking for anything in return. Every practical instinct told her to be suspicious, but her heart recognized genuine kindness when she saw it. Yes, she said quietly. Thank you. Jonathan smiled, and Rebecca noticed how it transformed his entire face. Good. The apartment is just a few blocks from here. I'll drive you over and get you settled. As they prepared to leave his office, Rebecca felt something she had not experienced in weeks: hope. Maybe her luck was finally starting to change. Maybe there were still good people in the world who helped others simply because it was the right thing to do. She had no way of knowing that this moment of kindness would soon become the key to saving Jonathan's company and both of their futures. The guest apartment was modest but comfortable, with a small kitchen, living area, and bedroom. Rebecca stood in the doorway, still hardly believing her change of fortune. Just hours ago she had been collapsed on a sidewalk, and now she had a warm, safe place to stay. The refrigerator is stocked with basics, Jonathan explained, showing her around. There's a coffee maker, and the bathroom has fresh towels and toiletries. This is incredible, Rebecca said, running her hand along the back of a comfortable sofa. Are you sure about this? Completely sure, Jonathan replied. Take as long as you need to find work. There's no pressure. After Jonathan left, Rebecca took her first hot shower in 2 weeks. She stood under the steaming water until it began to run cold, washing away not just the grime of living rough, but some of the despair that had been weighing her down. She found clean clothes in a dresser drawer, simple items in various sizes that were clearly kept for guests. Rebecca selected jeans and a blue sweater that fit reasonably well, then made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window to watch the rain. For the first time in weeks, Rebecca allowed herself to think beyond basic survival. Tomorrow she could start looking for work in earnest, armed with a good night's sleep and renewed confidence. She could shower regularly, do laundry, and present herself as a professional rather than someone living out of her car. The next morning, Rebecca woke up feeling more rested than she had in months. She made coffee and toast, then sat down with her laptop to search for job opportunities. After sending out a dozen applications, she decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The area around Sterling Tech was bustling with activity. Coffee shops, restaurants, and small businesses lined the streets, creating the kind of urban community Rebecca had always enjoyed. She stopped at a local bakery and bought a muffin with some of her remaining money, savoring the simple pleasure of choosing what to eat. As she walked back toward the apartment, Rebecca noticed a commotion outside the Sterling Tech building. Several police cars were parked out front, and employees were gathered in small groups on the sidewalk, talking in worried whispers. Concerned that something might have happened to Jonathan, Rebecca approached one of the groups. "Excuse me," she said to a woman in a business suit. "Is everyone okay? I saw the police cars." "There was a security breach last night," the woman replied. "Someone hacked into our systems and stole client data. The FBI is investigating." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. A cybersecurity breach at Jonathan's company was serious business, potentially devastating for both the firm's reputation and its clients. She thanked the woman and hurried back to the apartment, her mind racing. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Rebecca opened it to find Jonathan standing in the hallway, looking exhausted and stressed. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," he said. "I wanted to check on you, and honestly, I needed to get away from the office for a few minutes." "I heard about the breach," Rebecca said, stepping aside to let him in. "I'm so sorry. How bad is it?" Jonathan sank into a chair and rubbed his temples. "Bad. They got into our main client database and accessed sensitive information for over 50 companies. Our reputation is built on security, and this makes us look incompetent." "When did you discover it?" Rebecca asked, sitting across from him. "This morning when our IT team ran routine diagnostics," Jonathan replied. "But based on the logs, the breach happened sometime last night while we were here." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "While we were here." "Jonathan, what if this wasn't random? What if someone was watching the building and waited until they saw you leave?" Jonathan looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Rebecca said, her analytical mind kicking into gear. "Cybercriminals don't usually target companies at random. They research their targets, learn their patterns, identify vulnerabilities. If someone has been planning this attack, they would know your schedule." "But our security systems are state-of-the-art," Jonathan protested. "External security, yes," Rebecca agreed. "But what about internal threats? What about social engineering? Sometimes the best security systems can be defeated by someone who knows exactly when and how to exploit them." Jonathan stared at her as the implications of what she was saying sank in. "You think it was an inside job?" "I think it's a possibility worth investigating," Rebecca said carefully. "Have you had any recent personnel changes? Anyone with access to sensitive systems who might have a grudge?" "There were some layoffs about 6 months ago," Jonathan admitted. "We had to cut costs after losing a major contract. But we were careful about revoking access credentials." "Were you careful about revoking emotional loyalty?" Rebecca asked gently. "Sometimes the most dangerous threats come from people who feel betrayed by their former employers." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, processing this new perspective on his company's crisis. Finally, he looked up at Rebecca with something that might have been hope. "You really understand this stuff, don't you?" he said. "It's what I've been doing for 8 years," Rebecca replied. "I've seen this pattern before." "Would you be willing to take a look at our systems?" Jonathan asked. "I mean, if you're interested and have time. I could pay you as a consultant." Rebecca felt her heart race with excitement. This was exactly the kind of work she was meant to do, and helping Jonathan's company would give her a chance to repay his kindness. "I'd be honored to help," she said. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "Don't pay me until we solve this," Rebecca said firmly. "I don't want there to be any question about my motives for helping you." Jonathan smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Deal. When can you start?" "Right now," Rebecca replied, already reaching for her laptop. As they prepared to head to Sterling Tech together, Rebecca realized that her expertise might be the key to saving the company that had saved her. Sometimes life had a way of bringing the right people together at exactly the right moment. Sterling Tech's offices buzzed with tense energy as Rebecca followed Jonathan through the corridors. Employees huddled around workstations, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. FBI agents moved quietly through the building, documenting evidence and interviewing staff members. "Jonathan," called a woman with short red hair as they approached the main server room. "The agents want to speak with you again." "Rebecca, this is Michelle Rodriguez, our head of IT," Jonathan said. "Michelle, this is Rebecca Mitchell. She's a cybersecurity specialist who's going to help us investigate the breach." Michelle looked skeptical as she shook Rebecca's hand. "No offense, but shouldn't we be handling this internally until the FBI finishes their investigation?" "Actually, having an outside perspective might be exactly what we need," Rebecca replied diplomatically. "Sometimes when you're too close to a problem, it's hard to see the patterns." Agent Sarah Chen, the lead FBI investigator, joined their conversation. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand you want to help, but this is an active federal investigation. We can't have civilians interfering with evidence." "I completely understand," Rebecca said. "I'm not asking to access any systems or evidence you're reviewing. but I might be able to help identify vulnerabilities or patterns that could prevent future attacks. Agent Chen studied Rebecca carefully. What's your background? 8 years in cybersecurity, specializing in threat analysis and penetration testing, Rebecca replied. I've worked on several similar cases, though obviously not during federal investigations. Where did you work previously? Agent Chen asked. TechShield Solutions in Austin, Rebecca said. I can provide references if needed. Jonathan watched this exchange with growing anxiety. The FBI's presence made everything feel more serious and urgent. His company's future hung in the balance, and every hour that passed without answers brought them closer to losing major clients. Agent Chen, Jonathan interjected, Rebecca has already identified some important questions about the timing and nature of this attack. Her insights could be valuable. Agent Chen considered this for a moment. All right, Ms. Mitchell. You can observe and offer input, but you cannot access any systems or evidence directly. Everything goes through me or my team. Thank you, Rebecca said. I appreciate your willingness to collaborate. As they toured the IT infrastructure, Rebecca's trained eye immediately spotted several concerning details. The main server room was secure, but she noticed that access logs showed unusual patterns of entry during off hours over the past several weeks. Michelle, who has keycard access to this room? Rebecca asked. All IT staff, department heads, and security personnel, Michelle replied. About 15 people total. And these after-hours entries, Rebecca said, pointing to a printout of access logs, do they correspond with scheduled maintenance on known projects? Michelle frowned as she reviewed the data. Some of them do, but not all. We should have records of any legitimate after-hours work. Agent Chen made notes as they talked. We'll need to cross-reference these access times with employee schedules and project documentation. In the main IT workspace, Rebecca observed the team's processes and security protocols. Everything seemed professional and well-organized, but she noticed something troubling in the network monitoring displays. How long have you been seeing these anomalous traffic patterns? She asked, pointing to a series of data spikes on one of the monitors. About 6 weeks, said Tom Bradley, a young IT analyst. We thought they were related to increased client activity, but we've been monitoring them just in case. 6 weeks, Rebecca repeated thoughtfully. That's well before last night's breach. This suggests the attackers were doing reconnaissance for quite some time. Jonathan felt his anxiety increase. Reconnaissance? What does that mean? It means someone was systematically mapping your network, identifying vulnerabilities, and planning their attack, Rebecca explained. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated operation. Agent Chen looked up from her notes. That supports our preliminary assessment. The sophistication of this attack suggests either organized cybercriminals or someone with inside knowledge. Or both, Rebecca added grimly. Sometimes the most effective attacks combine external expertise with internal access. Over the next several hours, Rebecca worked alongside the FBI team to analyze the breach. Her experience with similar attacks proved invaluable in identifying patterns and vulnerabilities that might have been overlooked. The good news is that the attackers seem to have focused on data theft rather than system destruction, Rebecca told Jonathan as they took a break in his office. Your infrastructure is intact, which means recovery is possible. What's the bad news? Jonathan asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. The bad news is that this level of sophistication suggests the attackers are not finished, Rebecca replied. Data theft is often just the first step in a larger operation. What do you mean? They could be planning to sell the data, use it for blackmail, or leverage it for additional attacks on your clients, Rebecca explained. We need to find out who did this and what their ultimate goal is. Jonathan stared out his office window at the city below. Just 24 hours ago, his biggest worry had been quarterly reports. Now his company faced potential ruin, and dozens of client companies were at risk because of the stolen data. How do we stop them? He asked. We need to think like they do, Rebecca said. We need to understand the motivations, their methods, and their next likely moves. And we need to do it quickly, before they can cause more damage. As the day wore on, Rebecca found herself energized by the challenge despite the serious circumstances. This was the kind of work she was born to do, and having the chance to use her skills to help Jonathan felt like a gift. But as she dug deeper into the evidence, Rebecca began to suspect that this attack was more personal than professional. Someone had specifically targeted Sterling Tech, and she was determined to find out who and why. The answers, when they came, would surprise everyone involved and reveal connections none of them had expected. By evening, the FBI team had finished their initial investigation and departed, leaving Sterling Tech's employees to grapple with the aftermath. Most of the staff had gone home, but Rebecca and Jonathan remained in his office, poring over data logs and security reports. "I keep thinking there's something we're missing," Rebecca said, rubbing her tired eyes. The attack was too precise, too targeted. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident on his face. "Our client database contains information for some of Denver's biggest companies. If that data gets sold or released, it could destroy not just us but dozens of other businesses." "Tell me about the layoffs 6 months ago," Rebecca said. "Who was affected, and how did they handle the news?" Jonathan sighed heavily. "We had to cut 20 positions across various departments. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. These were good people, talented people, but we had lost our biggest contract and couldn't afford to keep everyone." "Was anyone in IT affected?" "Yes, 3 people from Michelle's team," Jonathan replied. "Brad Stevens, Lisa Park, and David Chen." "Chen?" Rebecca looked up sharply. "Any relation to Agent Chen?" "I don't think so," Jonathan said. "David was our senior security analyst. Brilliant guy, but he took the layoff very personally. He felt like we were abandoning him after 5 years of loyal service." Rebecca made notes on her laptop. "What was his access level?" "He had administrative access to most of our systems," Jonathan admitted. "He helped design our current security infrastructure." "And when was his access revoked?" Jonathan frowned. "The day of his termination, of course. Michelle handled all the technical details." "I need to talk to Michelle," Rebecca said, standing up. "Tonight." They found Michelle still in the IT department, working late to strengthen security protocols in response to the breach. She looked up wearily as Jonathan and Rebecca approached. "Michelle, I need to ask you about David Chen's termination process," Rebecca said. "Specifically, how his system access was revoked." "Standard procedure," Michelle replied. "Keycard deactivated, passwords reset, remote access credentials cancelled. Everything by the book." "But David helped design your security systems," Rebecca pressed. "Would he know about backdoors or vulnerabilities that might not be obvious?" Michelle was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. "David was very thorough," she said slowly. "He believed in defense in depth, multiple layers of security. It's possible he built in access methods that weren't documented in our standard procedures." "What was his emotional state when he left?" Rebecca asked. "Angry," Michelle said without hesitation. "He felt betrayed. David had been working on a major security upgrade proposal, and he was convinced that if we implemented his recommendations, we could win back the contract we lost." Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. "We never reviewed his proposal. With the layoffs happening, it got lost in the shuffle." "Do you still have it?" Rebecca asked. Michelle nodded and pulled up a file on her computer. He submitted it the week before his termination. Ironically, some of his suggestions might have prevented last night's breach. As they reviewed David's proposal, Rebecca's suspicions grew stronger. The document demonstrated intimate knowledge of Sterling Tech systems and included detailed analysis of potential vulnerabilities. "This is either the work of someone trying to protect your company," Rebecca said, "or someone creating a roadmap for attacking it." "You think David is behind the breach?" Jonathan asked. "I think he's a person of interest," Rebecca replied carefully. "Someone with his knowledge, access history, and emotional motivation fits the profile." "But why would he attack us 6 months after being laid off?" Michelle wondered. "Maybe it took him 6 months to plan the attack," Rebecca suggested. "Or maybe something happened recently that triggered his desire for revenge." Jonathan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Agent Chen. If David is involved, the FBI needs to know." As Jonathan made the call, Rebecca continued analyzing the security logs. A pattern was emerging that made her increasingly certain they were on the right track. The timing of reconnaissance activities, the specific systems targeted, and the sophisticated methods used all pointed to someone with inside knowledge. Agent Chen is sending a team to David's last known address, Jonathan reported after ending his call. She wants to interview him tonight. Good, Rebecca said. But we can't wait for the FBI to solve this. If David is planning additional attacks, we need to secure your systems now. What do you recommend? Michelle asked. Rebecca looked at both of them seriously. We need to change everything. Every password, every access credential, every security protocol. If David built backdoors into your systems, we need to close them all. That will take all night, Michelle protested. Then we work all night, Rebecca replied. Your clients are counting on you to protect their data. We can't let them down. Jonathan looked at Rebecca with admiration and gratitude. Less than 48 hours ago, she had been a stranger collapsed outside his building. Now she was working tirelessly to save his company, asking for nothing in return. You don't have to do this, he told her. This isn't your responsibility. Yes, it is, Rebecca replied firmly. You helped me when I had nothing. Now I have a chance to help you. That's what decent people do for each other. As they prepared for a long night of security upgrades, Jonathan realized that meeting Rebecca might have been the most fortunate event of his life. Her expertise was exactly what Sterling Tech needed, but more than that, her presence reminded him that there were still good people in the world who helped others without expecting anything in return. He had no way of knowing that before the night was over, Rebecca's insights would not only save his company, but also uncover a conspiracy that went far beyond simple revenge. The Sterling Tech offices hummed with activity well past midnight as Rebecca, Jonathan, and Michelle worked to secure the company systems. Coffee cups and takeout containers littered the conference room they had converted into a command center. I've reset all administrative passwords and disabled legacy access protocols, Michelle reported, looking exhausted but determined. Good, Rebecca said, reviewing security logs on her laptop. I've identified 12 potential backdoors in the system architecture. We need to close each one individually. Jonathan watched Rebecca work with growing amazement. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she navigated complex security interfaces with the confidence of someone who had spent years mastering her craft. Despite having been homeless just days ago, she commanded respect from everyone in the room. How did you get into cybersecurity? Jonathan asked during a brief break. Rebecca looked up from her laptop, surprised by the personal question. My father was a computer programmer back when that was still an unusual career, she said. He taught me to code when I was 10 years old. I was fascinated by the puzzle aspect of it. And the security focus. College, Rebecca replied. I was studying computer science at the University of Texas, and one of my professors challenged the class to hack into a test system he had set up. I was the first student to find a way in. What was your approach? Michelle asked, genuinely curious. I realized that everyone else was trying to break through the technical defenses, Rebecca explained. But I focused on understanding the mindset of the person who built the system. Once I could think like him, I could anticipate his blind spots. That's exactly what you're doing now, Jonathan observed. Thinking like David Chen. Rebecca nodded. People often make the same kinds of mistakes repeatedly. If I can understand David's approach to security, I can probably predict how he would try to circumvent it. As the night progressed, Rebecca shared more details about her background. She had grown up in a middle-class family in Dallas, excelled in school, and earned a full scholarship to college. Her parents had been proud of her success in a male-dominated field. What happened to them? Jonathan asked gently. Car accident when I was 25, Rebecca said quietly. Drunk driver ran a red light. They were killed instantly. I'm so sorry, Jonathan said, and Rebecca could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. It was a long time ago, Rebecca replied, though the pain was still evident in her eyes. They would have been proud to see me working on something like this. Jonathan found himself sharing his own story as they worked. He talked about building Sterling Tech from nothing, the challenges of competing with larger firms, and the loneliness of being responsible for so many people's livelihoods. "I never wanted to be the kind of boss who treated employees like numbers," he said. "But when we lost that contract and had to do layoffs, I felt like I was betraying everyone who had trusted me." "You did what you had to do to keep the company alive," Rebecca replied. "Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones." "David didn't see it that way," Jonathan said. "He accused me of caring more about profit than people." "Maybe he was right to be angry," Rebecca said thoughtfully. "But anger doesn't justify what he's done. He's put dozens of innocent companies at risk." Around 3 in the morning, Agent Chen called with an update. "We couldn't locate David Chen at his last known address," she reported. "Neighbors say he moved out about 2 weeks ago without leaving a forwarding address." 2 weeks ago, Rebecca repeated. "That's right, when the reconnaissance activities on your network intensified." "So he was planning this for a while," Jonathan concluded. "It appears so," Agent Chen agreed. "We're tracking his financial records and known associates. If he's still in the area, we'll find him." As dawn approached, Rebecca felt confident that they had closed most of the security vulnerabilities in Sterling Tech systems. But she knew that fixing the technical problems was only half the battle. The company still faced the challenge of rebuilding client trust and managing the fallout from the data breach. "We need to be proactive about communicating with your clients," Rebecca advised as they wrapped up their work. "Honesty and transparency will serve you better than trying to minimize the situation." "I've scheduled calls with all our major clients for this morning," Jonathan said. "I plan to tell them exactly what happened and what we're doing to prevent future incidents." "That's good," Rebecca replied. "And you should consider offering additional security services at no charge for the next few months. Show them that you're committed to making this right." As the sun came up over Denver, Rebecca realized that she felt more fulfilled than she had in months. Working alongside Jonathan and Michelle to solve this crisis reminded her why she had chosen cybersecurity as a career. It was not just about technology. It was about protecting people and businesses from those who would do them harm. "Thank you," Jonathan said as they prepared to leave the office. "I don't know how we would have handled this without your help." "You would have figured it out," Rebecca replied. "You're stronger than you think." Jonathan looked at this remarkable woman who had transformed his crisis into an opportunity for growth and connection. "Would you consider staying on as a permanent consultant?" he asked. "Sterling Tech could use someone with your expertise." Rebecca felt her heart race with excitement, but she forced herself to consider the offer carefully. "Let's see how the next few days go," she said. "If we can resolve the situation successfully, then yes, I'd be very interested in working with you." As they walked out of the building together, Rebecca realized that her life had completely changed in just a few days. She had gone from homeless and desperate to essential and valued. More than that, she had found someone who appreciated not just her skills but her character. Looking at Jonathan, Rebecca wondered if the connection she felt was purely professional or something deeper. The way he had helped her without expecting anything in return, the respect he showed for her expertise, and the genuine kindness in his eyes all suggested that this partnership might become something more meaningful than either of them had expected. 3 days after the security breach, Rebecca had established herself as an integral part of Sterling Tech's response team. She arrived early each morning and worked late into the evening, earning the respect of employees who had initially been skeptical of the outsider Jonathan had brought in. The FBI investigation was progressing slowly. David Chen remained missing, and his digital footprints had gone cold after his apparent departure from Denver. Agent Chen updated the team daily, but leads were few and concrete evidence remained elusive. "We need to think differently about this," Rebecca told Jonathan as they reviewed the latest investigative reports in his office. "Maybe we're focusing too much on David as an individual and not enough on David as part of a larger operation." "What do you mean?" Jonathan asked. "This level of sophistication suggests resources and planning beyond what one disgruntled former employee could manage alone," Rebecca explained. "What if David was recruited by a larger cybercriminal organization?" Jonathan considered this possibility. That would explain the advanced techniques and the time lag between his termination and the attack. "Exactly," Rebecca said. "And if that's the case, then David might not be the real threat. He might just be a tool being used by someone else." Rebecca pulled up a map of recent cybersecurity incidents in the Denver area. Look at this pattern. Over the past 6 months, there have been 4 major data breaches at tech companies in the region, all using similar methods, all targeting client databases. You think they are connected? Jonathan asked. I think someone is systematically targeting Denver's tech sector, Rebecca replied. And they are using inside information to make their attacks more effective. This revelation prompted Agent Chen to expand her investigation beyond Sterling Tech. Within hours, she had identified connections between the various attacks that suggested a coordinated criminal enterprise. Ms. Mitchell's analysis appears to be correct, Agent Chen reported during an afternoon briefing. We're now looking at this as part of a larger pattern of corporate espionage and data theft. Does that change anything for us? Jonathan asked. It means you were not specifically targeted for revenge, Agent Chen replied. You were targeted because someone identified Sterling Tech as a valuable source of client data. Rebecca found this both reassuring and troubling. Sterling Tech had not been singled out for personal reasons, but the company was still part of a larger criminal operation that might not be finished with them. That evening, Rebecca was working alone in the conference room when she noticed something unusual in the network traffic logs. A pattern of data requests that seemed innocuous individually, but formed a troubling picture when viewed together. Jonathan, she called, and he appeared in the doorway moments later. I think someone is still in your system. What do you mean? We changed everything. Look at these data requests, Rebecca said, pointing to her screen. Someone is systematically accessing client information, but they are doing it slowly and carefully to avoid detection. Jonathan studied the logs with growing alarm. How is that possible? We locked down everything. Unless they found a way in that we didn't anticipate, Rebecca said grimly. Or unless the access is coming from someone who's supposed to be here. The implications of this possibility were staggering. If someone currently employed at Sterling Tech was working with the cybercriminals, then all their security improvements might be meaningless. We need to set a trap, Rebecca said after a moment of consideration. What kind of trap? We create false client data that looks valuable but contains tracking mechanisms, Rebecca explained. If someone accesses it inappropriately, we'll know who and when. Jonathan nodded slowly. How long will that take to set up? A few hours, Rebecca replied. But we have to be careful not to alert anyone to what we're doing. Working late into the night, Rebecca constructed an elaborate digital snare designed to catch the insider threat. She created fake client records with embedded tracking codes that would reveal exactly how and when the information was accessed. The beauty of this approach is that it's invisible to normal users, Rebecca explained to Jonathan as she finished the setup. Only someone specifically looking for valuable data to steal would find these records. And if someone accesses them, we'll know immediately, Rebecca said. The tracking software will capture their login credentials, IP address, and exactly what they do with the information. They did not have to wait long. The next morning, Rebecca's phone buzzed with an alert from the tracking system. Someone had accessed the fake client data just after midnight. Got them, Rebecca said, pulling up the detailed logs on her laptop. The access came from Michelle's login credentials. Jonathan stared at the screen in disbelief. That's impossible. Michelle has been working with us to fix this problem. The login came from Michelle's account, Rebecca said carefully, but that doesn't necessarily mean Michelle was the one using it. They found Michelle in the IT department, arriving early as usual to continue work on the security improvements. When Rebecca showed her the access logs, Michelle's face went pale. I never accessed those files, Michelle said emphatically. I was home asleep at midnight. You can check with my roommate. I believe you, Rebecca said. But someone used your credentials. Who else might have access to your login information? Michelle thought for a moment. I keep my passwords in an encrypted file on my work computer. The only people who might be able to access it would be other IT staff members. Who's been working late recently? Jonathan asked. All of us, Michelle replied. But Tom Bradley has been staying later than anyone. He's been really dedicated to fixing our security problems. Rebecca and Jonathan exchanged glances. Tom was a young analyst who had been with the company for 2 years. He seemed eager and professional, but Rebecca realized she had not paid much attention to his activities during the crisis. "Where's Tom now?" Rebecca asked. "He called in sick today," Michelle said. "First time he's missed work since the breach." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. "Michelle, I need you to check something for me. Look at Tom's access history over the past 2 weeks. Specifically, look for patterns that might correlate with the suspicious network activity." As Michelle pulled up the requested data, Rebecca's phone rang. It was Agent Chen. "Ms. Mitchell, we have David Chen in custody," the agent reported. "And he's ready to talk." "That's great news," Rebecca said. "What is he saying?" "He's claiming he was recruited by someone at Sterling Tech to provide inside information about your security systems," Agent Chen replied. "Someone who promised him revenge against the company that fired him." Rebecca looked at Jonathan and Michelle, realizing that the conspiracy was deeper and more personal than any of them had imagined. The real threat was not external criminals or disgruntled former employees, but someone they had trusted who had been working against them from within. The revelation that Tom Bradley had been working with David Chen sent shockwaves through Sterling Tech. Tom had been arrested at his apartment, where FBI agents found evidence of his collaboration with the cybercriminal network targeting Denver's tech companies. "I trusted him," Michelle said, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "He sat right next to me for 2 years, and I thought he was one of our most dedicated employees." "Don't blame yourself," Rebecca said gently. "Insider threats are the hardest to detect because they exploit trust, which is essential for any organization to function." Agent Chen's investigation revealed that Tom had been recruited by the cybercriminal organization 6 months earlier, shortly after David Chen's termination. The criminals had approached Tom through social media, gradually building a relationship and offering him money to provide inside information about Sterling Tech's security systems. Tom was struggling with student loan debt and credit card bills, Agent Chen explained during a briefing. The criminals offered him more money than he made in a year at Sterling Tech. For someone in his financial situation, it was a tempting offer. Jonathan felt sick thinking about how he had praised Tom's dedication during the crisis response, not realizing that Tom was reporting their every move to the criminals. "How much damage did he cause?" Jonathan asked. "Beyond the initial breach, he provided real-time updates on your security improvements," Agent Chen replied. "That's why the criminals were able to maintain access even after you changed your protocols." The news of the insider threat quickly spread through Sterling Tech, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust among employees. People began to question whether their colleagues could be trusted, and productivity suffered as everyone worried about who might be watching them. Rebecca recognized the signs of an organization in crisis and knew that rebuilding trust would be just as important as fixing the technical problems. "We need to be transparent about what happened," she advised Jonathan. "Hold an all-hands meeting and explain exactly how the breach occurred and what you're doing to prevent it from happening again." Jonathan was reluctant to share details that might make employees more anxious, but Rebecca convinced him that honesty was the only path forward. "People are already scared and suspicious," she said. "Secrecy will only make that worse. If you show them that you're committed to protecting both the company and its employees, they'll start to trust you again." The all-hands meeting was emotional and difficult. Jonathan stood before his employees and took full responsibility for the security failures that had allowed the breach to occur. He explained how Tom had been recruited and manipulated by criminals, emphasizing that Tom was as much a victim as anyone else. "I know this has shaken your confidence in the company and in each other," Jonathan said. "But I want you to know that we're implementing new security measures that will make this kind of attack much more difficult in the future." Rebecca stood up and addressed the group. "I know I'm new here, and some of you might wonder why Mr. Sterling brought in an outsider to help with this crisis. The truth is, fresh eyes sometimes see things that people who are too close to a problem might miss." She went on to explain the security improvements they had implemented and the ongoing efforts to protect client data. Her technical expertise and calm demeanor helped reassure employees that the company was taking the situation seriously. After the meeting, several employees approached Rebecca privately to thank her for her work and to ask questions about cybersecurity best practices. She realized that the crisis had created an opportunity to educate people about protecting themselves and their company from future threats. Would you be interested in conducting some security training sessions? Jonathan asked later that day. I think people would benefit from learning more about how to recognize and prevent these kinds of attacks. I'd be happy to, Rebecca replied. Education is one of the best defenses against cybercrime. Over the following week, Rebecca conducted training sessions for different departments within Sterling Tech. She taught employees how to recognize phishing emails, create strong passwords, and report suspicious activities. The sessions were well attended and helped rebuild confidence in the company's security measures. The response from Sterling Tech's clients was better than Jonathan had feared. Several clients expressed appreciation for the company's transparency and proactive communication about the breach. Some even increased their contracts with Sterling Tech, impressed by the rapid response and comprehensive security improvements. We're not just surviving this crisis, Jonathan told Rebecca, as they reviewed client feedback. We're actually coming out stronger than before. That's what happens when people work together to solve problems instead of hiding from them, Rebecca replied. The local business community had also rallied around Sterling Tech. Other technology companies shared their own experiences with cybersecurity threats and offered assistance with security improvements. A local business association organized a cybersecurity awareness seminar, with Rebecca as one of the featured speakers. I never expected this level of support, Jonathan said as they prepared for the seminar. I thought a data breach would destroy our reputation. It might have, if you had tried to cover it up or blame others, Rebecca said. But by taking responsibility and asking for help, you showed people that Sterling Tech is the kind of company they want to do business with. The seminar was held at the Denver Convention Center and drew hundreds of attendees from across the region. Rebecca's presentation on insider threats and prevention strategies received enthusiastic applause and led to several consulting opportunities with other companies. You're becoming quite the local expert on cybersecurity, Jonathan observed as they fielded questions after the presentation. I'm just sharing what I've learned, Rebecca replied. But it feels good to use my experience to help others avoid the problems we faced. As they drove back to Sterling Tech after the seminar, Rebecca reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from being homeless and desperate to being a respected cybersecurity consultant with a growing reputation in the Denver business community. More importantly, she had found a sense of purpose and belonging that had been missing from her life since her parents' death. Working with Jonathan and the Sterling Tech team felt like being part of a family again. I have something to ask you, Jonathan said as they walked into the building together. What's that? I'd like to offer you a permanent position as our Director of Cybersecurity, he said. The job comes with a competitive salary, full benefits, and the opportunity to build a security program from the ground up. Rebecca felt her heart race with excitement, but she also felt a flicker of something else, uncertainty about whether accepting the job would change the relationship she had developed with Jonathan. Can I have some time to think about it? She asked. Of course, Jonathan replied. Take all the time you need. As Rebecca considered the offer, she realized that her feelings for Jonathan had grown beyond professional respect and gratitude. She was falling in love with him, and she wondered if he felt the same way about her. 2 weeks after Tom Bradley's arrest, Sterling Tech had not only recovered from the cybersecurity breach, but had actually strengthened its position in the market. Rebecca's comprehensive security overhaul had impressed clients and attracted new business from companies seeking robust protection for their data. I've never seen anything like it, Michelle told Rebecca as they reviewed the latest security reports. We've gone from being seen as vulnerable to being considered the gold standard for cybersecurity in Denver. Rebecca smiled as she looked at the monitoring displays showing normal, secure network traffic. It's amazing what can happen when people work together to solve problems instead of just trying to assign blame. The FBI investigation had concluded with the arrest of 7 members of the cybercriminal organization that had targeted Denver's tech sector. David Chen had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, while Tom Bradley was enrolled in a rehabilitation program designed to help young people avoid future involvement in cybercrime. I still can't believe Tom was working against us, Michelle said. He seemed so committed to the company. Financial pressure can make people do things they never thought they would do, Rebecca replied. The criminals who recruited him were experts at identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities in people, not just computer systems. Jonathan appeared in the doorway of the IT department, looking more relaxed than Rebecca had seen him since the crisis began. Agent Chen just called with the final update on the investigation, he said. All stolen data has been recovered, and there's no evidence that any client information was sold or distributed. That's wonderful news, Rebecca said. Your clients will be relieved to hear that. They already are, Jonathan replied. In fact, 3 companies have signed new contracts with us this week, specifically because of our reputation for handling security crises effectively. As the immediate crisis had resolved, Rebecca found herself thinking more seriously about Jonathan's job offer. The position would provide financial security and professional fulfillment, but she was also concerned about the complexity it might add to her relationship with Jonathan. That evening, Jonathan invited Rebecca to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Denver skyline. They had shared many meals during the crisis response, but this felt different, more personal and less focused on business. I wanted to thank you properly for everything you've done, Jonathan said as they settled into their seats. Sterling Tech wouldn't exist today without your help. You give me too much credit, Rebecca replied. You had a good team and strong systems. I just helped you see what was already there. That's not true, and you know it, Jonathan said gently. Your expertise saved the company, but more than that, your character showed everyone how to handle a crisis with integrity. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. I learned from watching you, she said. The way you took responsibility and protected your employees even when it would have been easier to blame others, that showed real leadership. They talked about the past few weeks, sharing perspectives on the challenges they had faced and the lessons they had learned. Rebecca found herself opening up about her fears and hopes in ways she had not done since her parents' death. What's your decision about the job? Jonathan asked as they finished their main course. Rebecca had been dreading this question because she was not sure how to express her concerns without revealing her feelings for him. I want to accept, she said carefully, but I'm worried about potential complications. What kind of complications? Rebecca took a deep breath and decided to be honest. Personal ones. I've developed feelings for you that go beyond professional respect, and I'm not sure how that would affect a working relationship. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca worried that she had made a mistake by being so direct. But when he looked up, his eyes were warm and hopeful. I've been feeling the same way, he admitted. I've been trying to convince myself that it was just gratitude or admiration for your professional skills, but it's more than that. So where does that leave us? Rebecca asked. I think it leaves us with an opportunity to build something meaningful together, both professionally and personally, Jonathan said. If you're willing to try. Rebecca felt a surge of happiness that she had not experienced in years. I'd like that very much. Jonathan reached across the table and took her hand. So you'll take the job? Yes, Rebecca said, smiling. I'll take the job. And I'd like to see where this other thing goes too. As they walked back to the apartment building where Rebecca was still staying in the guest unit, they talked about their hopes for the future. Jonathan had learned that professional success meant little without personal connections, while Rebecca had rediscovered her sense of purpose and belonging. I keep thinking about that night when I found you outside the building, Jonathan said as they reached the entrance. If I had just driven past without stopping, neither of our lives would be what they are now. Maybe that's the real lesson from all of this, Rebecca replied. Sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected encounters with people who need help. They stood together in the lobby, both aware that they were at the beginning of something new and exciting. The crisis that had brought them together was over, but the partnership they had built would continue to grow and strengthen. I'll see you in the morning, Director Mitchell, Jonathan said with a playful smile. I'll see you in the morning, Mr. Sterling, Rebecca replied, matching his tone. As Rebecca rode the elevator up to her apartment, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she had been homeless and desperate, with no hope for the future. Now she had a career she loved, a company she believed in, and the beginning of a relationship that might become the most important part of her life. Sometimes, Rebecca thought, the worst moments in life were just the darkness before a new dawn. And sometimes, the kindness of strangers was the light that showed the way forward. 3 months later, Rebecca Mitchell stood in her new office at Sterling Tech, looking out at the Denver skyline as she prepared for her first major presentation as Director of Cybersecurity. The guest apartment had become home until she found a place of her own, but she was no longer a temporary resident. She was a valued member of the Sterling Tech family. The transformation in her life still felt almost too good to be true. She had gone from sleeping in her car to leading security initiatives for one of Denver's most respected technology companies. More importantly, she had found love and purpose in ways she had never expected. Ready for the big presentation? Jonathan asked, appearing in her doorway with 2 cups of coffee. As ready as I can be, Rebecca replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. The board of directors can be intimidating, but I think they'll be impressed with our security improvements. Sterling Tech's board was meeting to review the company's response to the cybersecurity crisis and to approve Rebecca's proposal for expanding the security division. Her presentation would cover not only the technical improvements they had implemented, but also the business opportunities created by their enhanced reputation. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished here," Jonathan said, settling into a chair across from her desk. "In 3 months, you've built a security program that other companies are trying to copy." Rebecca smiled at the compliment, but remained focused on the work ahead. "We've made good progress, but there's still a lot to do. Cybersecurity is an ongoing challenge, not a problem you solve once and forget about." The relationship between Rebecca and Jonathan had developed slowly and carefully. They were both conscious of the professional complications that could arise from mixing business and personal relationships, so they had agreed to keep their romantic involvement separate from their work responsibilities. It was not always easy, but the arrangement seemed to be working. Rebecca's colleagues respected her expertise and leadership, while Jonathan's feelings for her never interfered with his evaluation of her professional performance. "The board is going to love your proposal for the security consulting division," Jonathan said. 3 companies have already committed to hiring us for comprehensive security assessments. "It feels good to help other businesses avoid the problems we faced," Rebecca replied. "And it's a natural extension of our core capabilities." The presentation went better than either of them had hoped. The board members were impressed by Sterling Tech's recovery from the cybersecurity crisis and enthusiastic about Rebecca's plans for growth. They approved her proposal to expand the security division and authorized the hiring of additional cybersecurity specialists. "Congratulations," said board member Patricia Walsh as the meeting concluded. "You've taken a potential disaster and turned it into a competitive advantage." "Thank you," Rebecca replied. "But the real credit goes to the entire Sterling Tech team. They responded to the crisis with professionalism and dedication." After the board meeting, Jonathan and Rebecca walked to a nearby park to celebrate the successful presentation. The autumn air was crisp and clear, with golden leaves falling from the trees that lined the walking paths. "I have something to tell you," Jonathan said as they found a quiet bench overlooking a small pond. Rebecca looked at him with curiosity. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news, I hope," Jonathan replied with a nervous smile. "Sterling Tech has been approached by a venture capital firm about expanding into other markets. They want to use our cybersecurity expertise as the foundation for a national security consulting company." "That's exciting," Rebecca said. "What would that mean for us?" "It would mean significant growth and new opportunities," Jonathan explained. "But it would also mean more responsibility and possibly some travel. I wanted to discuss it with you before making any commitments." Rebecca considered the implications of such an expansion. It would be professionally challenging and rewarding, but it would also change the intimate, family-like atmosphere that had made Sterling Tech special. "What's your instinct about it?" she asked. "My instinct is that we're ready for the challenge," Jonathan said. "We've proven that we can handle crisis and growth. And having you as our security leader gives me confidence that we can maintain our standards even as we expand." They talked for an hour about the potential opportunities and challenges of expansion. Rebecca found herself excited by the prospect of building something larger and more impactful, while also appreciating the foundation they had established in Denver. "I think we should do it," she said finally. "But with conditions. We need to maintain the culture and values that make Sterling Tech special. Growth shouldn't come at the expense of treating people well." Jonathan nodded emphatically. "Agreed. We'll only expand in ways that align with our commitment to integrity and employee welfare. As they walked back toward the Sterling Tech building, Rebecca reflected on how much her perspective on life had changed. 3 months ago, she had been focused purely on survival. Now she was thinking about growth, impact, and building something meaningful for the future. I keep thinking about David Chen and Tom Bradley, she said as they reached the building entrance. I wonder if their lives would have been different if someone had offered them help instead of exploitation. That's one of the reasons I want to expand the company, Jonathan replied. If we can create more good jobs and opportunities, maybe we can prevent other people from making the kinds of choices they made. That evening, Jonathan and Rebecca had dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same place where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other. They talked about their hopes for the company's future and their own relationship. I have something else to tell you, Jonathan said as they finished dessert. Rebecca looked at him expectantly. I love you, he said simply. I know we've been taking things slowly, but I wanted you to know how I feel. Rebecca felt her heart swell with happiness. I love you too, she replied. More than I thought I could love anyone. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware that they had reached an important milestone in their relationship. What happens now? Rebecca asked. Now we build a life together, Jonathan said. We grow the company, we help other people, and we see where this love takes us. As they walked home through the Denver streets, Rebecca thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost everything, her job, her home, her sense of security, but in losing everything, she had found something better than anything she had imagined. The kindness of a stranger had saved her life, but her own strength and expertise had saved his company. Together, they had built something that was greater than either of them could have achieved alone. 6 months later, Sterling Tech Security Consulting had offices in 3 cities and was considered one of the premier cybersecurity firms in the region. Rebecca and Jonathan were engaged to be married, with a wedding planned for the following spring. But the most important transformation was not professional or romantic. It was the recognition that even in the darkest moments, there were still good people in the world who would reach out to help a stranger in need. And sometimes, that kindness created connections that changed everything.